All right, buckle up. Because what we're about to dive into is hands down one of the most wild, dramatic, and absolutely unhinged collections of stories ever told by human beings. We're talking about the Greek gods, the Olympians, the crew that basically ran the show for thousands of years and left a mark so deep that we're still talking about them right now, in the 21st century. And here's the thing, this isn't just mythology. This is history. This is culture. This is the way an entire civilization made sense of the world around them. Thunder in the sky? That's Zeus throwing a tantrum. Earthquake shaking the ground? Poseidon's having a bad day. Crops dying? You probably ticked off Demeter. So let's go back. Way, way back, to around the 700s BC, to ancient Greece. Picture a world without science as we know it. No internet to look up why lightning strikes or why the sea gets rough. No meteorology app telling you a storm is coming. You're a farmer, a fisherman, a soldier, and the world around you is alive, breathing, watching. Every force of nature has a face, a name, a personality. And that personality, honestly, kind of messy. The Greeks were sharp people, brilliant even. They built temples that still stand today. They wrote philosophy that still gets taught in universities. They invented theater, democracy, the Olympic Games. But when it came to explaining the big questions, why are we here? What controls the forces of nature? What happens after we pass on? They turned to the gods. And boy, did those gods deliver. We're talking about 12 major deities living up on Mount Olympus, the highest mountain in Greece, literally poking through the clouds. You couldn't climb it back then without feeling like you were intruding on something sacred. And the Greeks believed that up there, above the clouds, the gods feasted, argued, fell in love, plotted revenge, and basically lived like the most dramatic family you've ever seen. Does that sound familiar? Doesn't that hit a little close to home? Let's start at the very beginning. And in Greek mythology, the beginning is rough. Before the Olympians, before Zeus, before any of the gods we're about to talk about, there was chaos. Not chaos like a messy room, chaos as in a primordial void, the empty nothingness that existed before anything else. From chaos came the first beings, Gaia, the earth herself, Tartarus, the deep abyss, and Eros, the force of love and attraction. Gaia eventually gave rise to the Titans, massive, ancient beings of incredible power. And from the Titans came the Olympians. But the transition wasn't peaceful, not even a little. The ruler of the Titans was Cronus, a figure so paranoid about losing power that when he heard a prophecy saying one of his own children would overthrow him, he did something so drastic it set the stage for the entire Greek mythology. He swallowed his children whole, every single one. Rhea, his wife, watched this happen to child after child and finally decided enough is enough. When Zeus was born, she wrapped a rock in swaddling cloth, handed it to Cronus, and secretly hid baby Zeus away on the island of Crete. Cronus swallowed the rock, none the wiser. And Zeus grew up, and when the time came, he came back. He forced Cronus to release his siblings, Hera, Demeter, Hestia, Poseidon, Hades, all of them, fully grown, ready to fight. And fight they did. The Titanomachy, the war between the Olympians and the Titans, lasted 10 years. 10 years of cosmic warfare that shook the universe itself. In the end, Zeus and his siblings won. The Titans were cast down into Tartarus, and the Olympians took their place as the rulers of everything. Talk about a family reunion, right? Now let's talk about the big players, because you can't discuss Greek mythology without giving proper respect to each one. Zeus, king of the gods, ruler of Mount Olympus, lord of the sky, lightning, and thunder. If there was a corporate hierarchy on Olympus, Zeus was the CEO, except way more dramatic, way more unpredictable, and with a weakness for romantic entanglements that would make any soap opera writer jealous. Zeus wielded the thunderbolt like it was his signature weapon, his calling card. You step out of line, You show disrespect to the gods or to the natural order, you might just catch a thunderbolt to the face. But Zeus wasn't just about raw power. He was also the god of justice, of hospitality, of order. The Greeks called him the father of gods and men, and that wasn't just poetic language. He literally fathered dozens of divine and semi-divine children. Here's a question worth sitting with. When you think about absolute power, do you imagine it coming with wisdom? Or do you think power and wisdom rarely go hand in hand? Zeus could be just and wise. He could also be petty and impulsive. That tension, the highest power in the universe being both noble and flawed, is one of the things that makes Greek mythology so endlessly fascinating. And here's where things get spicy, as they say. Hera knew exactly what her husband was up to. All the affairs, all the mortal women, all the divine entanglements, and she was not having it. Hera is one of the most complex figures in all of Greek mythology, because she's simultaneously a goddess of marriage and the most famous example of a spouse dealing with constant infidelity. Her response was not meek. Hera was fierce, vindictive, and relentless when she felt wronged. She pursued Heracles, Hercules, across his entire life because he was Zeus's son by another woman. She sent plagues, monsters, and madness after him. She's the driving force behind some of the most epic stories in the whole mythology. And yet, she never left. She stayed, she fought, she ruled alongside Zeus. What does that say about power, about loyalty, about the complexity of relationships? That's the kind of question the Greeks loved to wrestle with. If you've ever stood at the edge of the ocean and felt genuinely small, that feeling has a name in ancient Greece, and that name is Poseidon. The sea was everything to the Greeks. They were a maritime people. Trade, warfare, communication, it all moved across the water. And the sea was unpredictable, dangerous, glorious. So of course the god who ruled it reflected all of that. Poseidon was powerful, proud, and temperamental. A calm sea meant he was in a good mood. A storm that came out of nowhere and swallowed a ship whole, that was Poseidon deciding someone needed to learn a lesson. He competed with Athena for the patronage of Athens, the most powerful city in Greece, in one of mythology's most famous contests. Each offered a gift to the city. Poseidon struck his trident into a rock and produced a spring of salt water. Athena offered an olive tree, a source of food, wood, and oil. The people chose Athena. Poseidon was furious, and the Greeks believed that fury echoed through every flood and earthquake that hit the Attica region. Here's something that blows people's minds when they first hear it. Athena was born fully grown, fully armored, straight out of Zeus's head. Zeus had swallowed her mother, the Titaness Metis, who was pregnant, because of a prophecy that her child would be greater than him. But Metis continued crafting armor inside Zeus's head, and the pounding gave Zeus such a headache that Hephaestus had to crack his head open. And out came Athena, battle-ready. That origin story tells you everything about Athena. She is wisdom born from the mind, not from emotion. She is strategy, not brute force. She helped Perseus defeat Medusa, aided Odysseus throughout his long journey home, and stood as the embodiment of the kind of intelligence that wins wars through planning rather than power alone. The owl, still a symbol of wisdom today, was her sacred animal. The olive tree, symbol of peace and prosperity, was her gift. And the city that bore her name went on to become one of the greatest intellectual centers the world has ever seen. Does that make you wonder how much of a city's character comes from the values it chooses to celebrate? If Zeus was the CEO, Apollo was the golden boy of the family. He was depicted as the ideal of youthful beauty, athletic perfection, and artistic brilliance. He drove the sun chariot across the sky each day. He played the lyre so beautifully that nature itself stopped to listen. He was the patron of the oracle at Delphi, the most important oracle in all of ancient Greece, where people came from across the Mediterranean world to ask questions about the future. Apollo represents something the Greeks deeply admired: The idea that intellect, artistry, and physical excellence could exist in the same person. The complete human, the ideal toward which mortals should aspire. But Apollo had a dark side too. His arrows, which he wielded with perfect precision, could bring plague as easily as healing. He was capable of terrible punishment when disrespected. The Greeks understood that the same force that creates can also destroy. The same sun that grows crops can burn them. Where Apollo was associated with civilization and the arts, Artemis was associated with the wild. She roamed the forests with her band of nymphs, bow in hand, mistress of every wild creature. She was one of the few Olympians who remained a virgin by choice. Not a weakness, but an expression of absolute independence and self-determination. Artemis was fierce in her protection of those under her care and equally fierce in her punishment of those who crossed her. The hunter Actaeon accidentally stumbled upon her bathing in the woods. The punishment for this intrusion was swift and severe. Actaeon was transformed into a stag and hunted down by his own hounds. The Greeks worshipped Artemis as a protector of young women, of childbirth, of the natural world. Her temple at Ephesus was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, one of the greatest structures ever built by human hands, dedicated to a goddess of the wilderness. There's something poetic about that, don't you think? Let's be real. Ares was not the most popular god on Olympus. The Greeks didn't dislike war exactly. They were warriors after all, and military prowess was deeply respected. But the kind of war Ares represented, the chaos, the bloodlust, the violence for its own sake, that made even the other gods uncomfortable. Ares was raw, aggressive, and impulsive. He would charge into battle without strategy, without planning, driven purely by the thrill of conflict. And more often than not, he got beaten. By Athena, by clever mortals, even by Heracles. The message was clear. Brute aggression without intelligence isn't glory. It's just destruction. And yet the Greeks acknowledged Ares. They built him temples. They honored him before going to war, because they understood that war is part of reality, and reality doesn't disappear just because you find it uncomfortable. Born from the sea foam, according to one tradition, rising from the waves near Cyprus, the most beautiful being ever to exist. Aphrodite's power wasn't military. It wasn't intellectual. It was desire itself, the irresistible pull that brings people together, that starts wars, that ends kingdoms. And she started a war too, the most famous one in all of Greek mythology. The Trojan War began because 3 goddesses, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, argued over a golden apple inscribed with the words, "To the fairest." Paris of Troy was chosen to judge between them. Each goddess offered a bribe. Aphrodite offered the most beautiful mortal woman in the world, Helen of Sparta. Paris chose Aphrodite. He took Helen, and the entire Greek world went to war over it. Does love have that kind of power? Can a single feeling, a single choice, change the course of history? The Greeks said yes, absolutely yes. Here is the most unlikely Olympian. While the other gods were beautiful, powerful, and graceful, Hephaestus was said to have been born lame. Some accounts say he was thrown from Olympus as a baby, others say he was born with his disability. Either way, he was the outsider among a family of perfection. And yet, Hephaestus made everything. The thunderbolts of Zeus, the armor of Achilles, the palaces of Olympus itself. He was the divine craftsman, the original engineer, the god who turned raw materials into wonders. His forge was said to be beneath the earth, which is why the Greeks explained volcanic eruptions as Hephaestus working at his anvil. His story carries a message that resonates across thousands of years, that the person who doesn't fit in, who is overlooked and underestimated, might just be the one building the world everyone else lives in. Doesn't that make you stop and think? Hermes was the fast one, the clever one, the one you sent when you needed a message delivered across the universe in the blink of an eye. He wore winged sandals and a winged helmet, and could move between the world of the living, the world of the gods, and the underworld. The only god who could freely cross all three realms. He was also the patron of merchants and thieves, which the Greeks saw as more connected than we might today. Commerce requires a certain shrewdness, a certain comfort with negotiation and persuasion. Hermes embodied that quality, the ability to talk your way in or out of anything. As a baby, literally on the day he was born, he stole Apollo's sacred cattle, hid them, and when confronted, invented the lyre from a tortoise shell, and played it so beautifully that Apollo forgave him and accepted the instrument as payment. On day one of his existence, Hermes was already pulling off sophisticated negotiations. The word hermeneutics, the art of interpretation, comes from his name, because language and meaning, the ability to communicate and be understood across distances, is itself a kind of divine gift. Demeter might be the most relatable of all the Olympians, because her most famous story is about a mother's love and the grief of loss. Her daughter Persephone was taken by Hades, pulled down into the underworld. And Demeter, beside herself with grief, abandoned her role as goddess of the harvest. She wandered the earth, inconsolable, and while she wandered, nothing grew. The crops withered, the trees went bare. Famine spread across the world. The gods couldn't ignore this forever. The mortals who fed them with sacrifices and prayers were starving. Zeus eventually intervened, and a compromise was reached. Persephone would spend part of the year in the underworld with Hades, and the rest of the year above ground with her mother. And that, said the ancient Greeks, is why we have seasons. When Persephone is above ground, Demeter is joyful, and the earth is green and fertile. When Persephone returns below, Demeter mourns, and autumn and winter come. It's a story about natural cycles told through family relationships, which is kind of beautiful when you sit with it. The last to join the Olympians, and in many ways the most complicated, Dionysus represented something the other gods didn't: the dissolution of order, the breaking of boundaries, the state of letting go completely. He was the god of wine, not just as a drink, but as a transformative experience, the breaking down of social hierarchies, the release of everyday constraints. His festivals, the Dionysian rites, were wild, ecstatic celebrations where the normal rules of society were suspended. And out of those festivals, specifically the choral performances in his honor, came theater, drama, comedy, and tragedy. Two of the most enduring art forms in human history were born from celebrations of a god who represented chaos and transformation. Dionysus was also a god who had suffered. He was born twice. His mortal mother was destroyed before he was fully formed, and Zeus sewed him into his own thigh to gestate until he was ready. He faced persecution, was driven to madness, wandered the world before reclaiming his divine status. He understood what it meant to be broken and put back together. And maybe that's why his worship connected so deeply with ordinary people. And then there's Hades. Often left off the list of Olympians because he didn't live on Olympus. He ruled the underworld. But he was one of the three brothers who divided the cosmos between them after the defeat of the Titans. Zeus took the sky, Poseidon took the sea, and Hades took the realm below. The Greeks feared Hades, not because he was evil, but because he was inescapable. He was the god of the dead, the ruler of every soul that ever existed. He was stern, implacable, just. He didn't play favorites, didn't accept bribes, didn't let souls leave. His realm was where everyone ended up eventually, without exception. The very act of saying his name was considered unlucky, which is why the Greeks often used other names for him. Pluton, meaning the wealthy one, because all the precious metals and minerals of the earth came from below ground, from his domain. He is a reminder that every civilization needs a way to make sense of the end. The Greeks didn't look away from it. They looked straight at it, gave it a name, and built a whole mythology around what it means to live in the shadow of inevitability. Now here's something worth really sitting with. All of these gods, with their jealousy, their love affairs, their petty grudges, their moments of nobility and moments of pettiness, they were made in the image of human beings, not the other way around. The Greeks looked at humanity, all its greatness, all its flaws, all its contradictions, and they said, even the gods are like this. Even the most powerful forces in the universe struggle with pride, with desire, with grief, with the need to be recognized. And somehow that made the universe feel less lonely. If the gods themselves wrestled with these things, maybe mortals weren't so pathetic for wrestling with them too. Greek mythology gave people permission to be complex. And here's the real kicker. These stories weren't just entertainment. They were woven into every part of daily life. You didn't start a sea voyage without making an offering to Poseidon. You didn't plant a crop without acknowledging Demeter. Before going to war, you sought favor with both Athena and Ares. The gods were present, active, watching. And if you forgot them, if you let your pride tip over into arrogance, that Greek concept called hubris, you were in serious trouble. The myth of Icarus, the story of Arachne, the fate of Niobe. Over and over again, the mythology returns to the same lesson. Human greatness is real, but there are limits. And the moment you forget those limits, when you start thinking you're beyond consequence, beyond humility, beyond the natural order, that's when the fall comes.
The connection between
Sound familiar?
and spine is
That lesson hasn't aged a day.
Yet the botanical reference.
The influence of this mythology didn't stop in ancient Greece. It moved through Rome. The Romans adopted the Greek gods wholesale, just with different names. Jupiter for Zeus, Juno for Hera, Neptune for Poseidon, Venus for Aphrodite, Mars for Ares, Mercury for Hermes. The whole pantheon crossed the Mediterranean and embedded itself into the Roman Empire. And from Rome, it entered the language of Western civilization. The days of the week carry their names. The planets in our solar system carry their names. The months of the year carry their names. Virtually every field of science and medicine uses terminology rooted in Greek mythology. Museums, courthouses, government buildings, they're built in the architectural style of Greek temples. The word music comes from the Muses. The word ocean comes from the Titan Oceanus. The word panic comes from Pan, the god of the wild whose terrifying cry sent mortals fleeing. Hypnosis comes from Hypnos, the god of sleep. Echo comes from the nymph Echo. Narcissism comes from the myth of Narcissus. These stories didn't just survive, they became the bones of Western culture. And maybe the most remarkable thing about the Greek gods is that they weren't perfect. They weren't distant, untouchable, all-knowing beings beyond human understanding. They were messy, passionate, contradictory, just like us. They made mistakes that had consequences. They loved and lost and fought and grieved. They had favorites, and they played them. They had enemies, and they pursued them. The Greeks created gods who felt real because they behaved like people. And in doing so, they created the greatest collection of stories ever told. Every superhero movie, every epic fantasy novel, every dramatic family saga that has ever resonated with a human audience traces a direct line back to these stories. Back to a mountainside in ancient Greece, around 700 BC, where a civilization looked up at the sky and the sea and the earth and said, "There are forces at work here greater than us. And here is what we think they look like." And what they came up with has never been forgotten. So the next time you see lightning split the sky, think of Zeus. When the ocean gets rough and unpredictable, that's Poseidon in a mood. When you fall in love with someone you probably shouldn't, well, you can blame Aphrodite for that one. The gods of Olympus haven't gone anywhere. They're still here, in our language, our architecture, our art, our stories, in every hero who tries to fly a little too close to the sun, in every parent who would move heaven and earth for a child, in every craftsman who creates something beautiful from raw material. They're in us, because the Greeks made them from us. And honestly, that's kind of the most powerful thing of all.